This video is made possible by Second Call Defense. Second Call Defense provides immediate, upfront legal protection for a member who is forced to use any legal weapon for self-defense. So protect yourself today with Second Call Defense. I did. You'll find the link in the description. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I say this every time. I'm super grateful for everything that you do. Now, before I get into anything else, let me let you know that this interview is going to be long. And the reason it's going to be long is because we're going to talk about the legal battle, not just in the state of California, but a little bit around the country, and some specific legal battles going on in the state of Hawaii. So if you live in Hawaii or you're interested in what's going on for concealed carry there and some of the other battles there, stick through the entire interview because Chuck Michelle and CRPA have actually filed lawsuits, and they're going to file more in the state of Hawaii to fight for you too. So I've got Chuck Michelle from Michelle & Associates. Chuck is the volunteer president and chief counsel for the California Rifle and Pistol Association, and he's also the founding partner at Michelle & Associates, a major Second Amendment law firm. He's going to talk about where we are in the legal fight. I just did an interview the other day with Rick Travis talking about the legislative fight. So this is the legal one, and as a result, it gets into the weeds a little bit. But again, I want to urge you, watch it all the way through if you'd like to really know what's going on, because Chuck talks about a lot of specifics, and he also talks about it in English instead of legalese, for which I'm very grateful. Now, if you would like to support the channel, you're welcome to do that by going to GunGuyTV Crew. That's where I produce exclusive content every week that you can only find there. And it is a great way to interact with me and to interact with the other GunGuyTV Crew members. You can do that by going to GunGuyTVCrew.com, or you can go to Locals or Patreon. GunGuyTV Crew is in both of those places. So if you're already on one of those platforms, you should be able to find it. I also urge you to check us out on these other video platforms, because sometimes YouTube deletes videos here, and it's also good to support these other platforms. They're trying to support your freedom. Lastly, you might check out the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast. It's available on your favorite podcast player, and there's also a video version you can watch on Rumble. Links for all of that stuff are in the description. Let's go talk to Chuck. Chuck, thank you very much for joining me again. You are a busy man. You're fighting, and your lawyers are fighting all over the place, and you had mentioned that you were fighting in my neck of the woods down here in San Diego. What's going on? Well, we're going to talk about a few parts of the state, obviously, and maybe some other places, but what's going on in San Diego in particular?
Okay, well, I need to give you a little, your listeners, viewers, a little backstory so they understand what just happened. Remember, CRPA filed the Duncan case challenging the 10-plus round magazine ban, the Rhodey case for Kim Rhodey, the Olympic trap shooter, who we all know and love, challenging the ammunition background check law. And then FPC filed the Miller case, and CRPA also had the Rupp case, challenging the state's so-called assault weapon law. All right, the Rhodey case, the Duncan case, and the Miller case were all heard by Judge Benitez down in San Diego, and he struck down all three of those laws before the Bruen case came down from the United States Supreme Court that changed the test on that you apply when you're evaluating the constitutionality of a gun law under Second Amendment jurisprudence. So those cases had all gone up on appeal. They were in the Ninth Circuit as the Bruen case was making its way through the Supreme Court. Duncan was out ahead, and it actually won in front of a three-judge panel, which was a huge win. To have the Judge Benitez decision confirmed by the three-judge panel. Naturally, some of the judges on the Ninth Circuit don't like the Second Amendment, so they asked for an en banc review by an 11-judge panel, and we lost there. We then asked the Supreme Court to take the case, and the Supreme Court held the case until it issues its Bruen decision. Once it issued the Bruen decision, it then took the Duncan case, but didn't have arguments on it. It just simply vacated the en banc decision against us and remanded the Duncan case back down to the Ninth Circuit to reconsider it now in light of their ruling, the Supreme Court's ruling in Bruen. Duncan, Rhodey, and Miller had been tied up behind Duncan, And once Duncan was sent back down, long story short, all three of those cases were further remanded back down to Justice Benitez's courtroom, Judge Benitez's courtroom in San Diego, the district court. And that's where they all are now. They're all sitting in front of Judge Benitez, and he's now had supplemental briefings put in on how the Bruin decision changes the analysis to determining the constitutionality of the magazine ban, the ammo background check, and the so-called assault weapon law. But before we could really get into that in depth, we had to get rid of something that Newsom did to try and make it impossible to challenge gun control laws in the state of California, which was SB 1327. SB 1327 did two things. It creates a private right of action for people to sue the gun industry. That has not been challenged yet, but I expect it will be very soon, probably by the trade association. If not, we'll get involved. CRPA can get involved. But in the meantime, CRPA and the attorneys for the Miller plaintiffs both filed lawsuits, again down in San Diego, challenging SB 1327, because what the other half of 1327 is, it shifts the way that you can recover fees when you win a case challenging a gun law. Basically makes it impossible to recover the attorney's fees that you had always been able to recover before when you win a constitutional challenge. And it makes not just the plaintiffs, but also the individual attorneys potentially liable for the state's attorney's fees if you don't win on every theory that you advance. In other words, it rigs the game so that everybody is afraid to file lawsuits because they're afraid they'll lose their house if they don't win on every point.
How can that possibly be constitutional or even acceptable? I mean,
well, yeah, that's our point. But the reason that they thought they could get away with this is because in Texas, the Texas legislature did a similar thing to try and dissuade groups that want to challenge abortion bans in Texas. And literally what California did was take the Texas statute, cross out abortion, write in firearms, and pass it into law. It's the exact same statute. And so the interesting thing is that the state of California, through the Attorney General, has taken the position that the Texas law is unconstitutional.
So wait a minute. The California AG says that the Texas law is unconstitutional, but they want to carbon copy that and use the same statute in California. So it's unconstitutional in Texas, but it's perfectly okay in California. Is that what they're saying?
Yes. And that's a point that we made rather poignantly to Judge Benitez, that the state, a lawyer, if you have two different clients, a lawyer could argue one way for this client and the other way for that client, but the Attorney General only has one client. The state of California is his client, and the state of California took the position that the Texas statute was unconstitutional. And they tried like hell to avoid having to take a position about whether or not the California statute was constitutional or not, because they kept offering to drop their right to seek fees if we lost anything under 1327. They kept waiving that so that it never became a concrete issue. But finally, in Justice Benitez's court, we said, there's a lot of unanswered, even if you don't pursue fees against us in the Miller, Rhodey, or Duncan cases, that doesn't change what's happening in other cases across the state that the CRPA is involved in, and it doesn't help us recover fees when we win. So there's still, you can't just moot the case. You can't make the case irrelevant simply by saying we won't pursue the fees that 1327 makes it possible for us to pursue. So they couldn't moot the case. Justice Benitez saw through that. Judge Benitez.
Well, so yeah, essentially they're saying, trust me. Just leave it alone. Trust me. We won't. Well, just trust us. We won't do it.
Right.
Of course, that's BS.
And so we said, no, we're not taking that deal. And we also said, by the way, you lawyers for the Department of Justice, you're taking unethical positions here that are sanctionable. and we're going to seek Rule 11 sanctions if you continue to argue this way.
Now, what does Rule 11 mean? What is that?
It's a provision in the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure that allows the court to sanction lawyers if they do something unethical. And our position is you're taking a conflicting argument, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth and jeopardizing the ability to access the courts that way. That's not ethical.
Does it get more unethical than that?
Well, not that I've, you know what?
Well, yeah, okay. You're right. But it's still pretty bad.
But yes, it's bad. And so there's to put this in perspective, there's a hearing on the 12th, Monday, on Duncan, Rhodey, and Miller, and also a billy case, a challenge to the California's ban on billy clubs, possession or carrying billies under the Second Amendment. So there's actually 4 cases down there, but they're all going to be heard, and we're going to figure out what's going on with them on the 12th. And let's come back to that because there's another new, actual, more interesting wrinkle in how those tests are going to be performed. But in the meantime, the judge set the 16th for a trial on the constitutionality of 1327. So the DOJ's brief was due today, actually, to take a position to defend the constitutionality of this fee-shifting provision in 1327. And last night we got word from the governor's office, the lawyer now for the governor himself, that the DOJ had informed the governor's office, and then the DOJ subsequently filed a brief in Benitez's courtroom, saying they are not going to defend the constitutionality of 1327. So they're not going to submit an argument that says why 1327 is constitutional and this fee-shifting rig game racket should be allowed. So that's
and that was the governor's baby too. I think he's the knucklehead that came up with that idea in the first place.
Absolutely, because he was mad that the Supreme Court didn't issue an injunction against the Texas abortion law. So he said, and by the way, that's not all that unusual. It's very rare for the Ninth Circuit or the Supreme Court to issue an injunction while the case is still going on down in the district court. So here's the more interesting to me, as a in the weeds lawyer, the states across the country, not just California, in the response to Bruin, the Bruin decision, which got rid of this interest balancing test where you tried to argue public policy and whether or not this law made people safer, and if they made it safer, how much safer, and was it worth the infringement on the Second Amendment to try and make people safer? It was this interest balancing test, which never really worked, was always subject to bias. The Ninth Circuit could put its thumb on the scale and make a case come out any way it wanted to. Bruin knocked all that out in favor of a historical test. You look at what the founders would have tolerated at the time that they passed the Second Amendment, and if there was a law on the books that's similar to analogous to some law that you're being challenged today, then maybe it's not a Second Amendment violation. But if there wasn't, then if there's no historical analog to the current law that's being challenged, then it's a Second Amendment violation.
Now, Chuck, let me ask you for a little clarity on that, because I get the question a lot. When they're looking for that historical analog, a law in history which is analogous, close to, or similar to the law that's in court at the time now, is there a window of time in which they have to find that law, or can they find that law anywhere in our history?
No, we know that at a minimum, it's restricted to the time that the Second Amendment actually passed or the time that the Second Amendment was kind of ratified by the 14th Amendment. So those two periods in history.
1791 to 1865.
Right.
Basically. Okay.
That's about it. And now we're arguing that you don't even consider 1865. It's only 1791.
Well, and that's the question is, why would you would consider what the text meant at the time that it was written, not what it means now.
Because
and what the founders would have tolerated when it was written. Why would you go to the 14th Amendment?
Because in theory, the Second Amendment was incorporated against the states by the 14th Amendment. So what they tolerated at the time of the 14th Amendment might be relevant to what they think is constitutional as applied to the states through the 14th Amendment.
Okay, so then the question becomes, and I'm sure your team has done a lot of research on this, so I'm going to ask the question. There can't be a lot of analogous laws in that time period, I wouldn't think. Is there?
Well,
what are they going to pull from? Are they just making stuff up?
This is where it gets funny. Okay, so the argument that's going on right now is are states entitled to bring in historians as experts to testify about what laws existed, or they're stretching it beyond that. They're going, what practices were there? What not just statutes that were expressly passed by the legislature, but what were the practices? And so for the large capacity magazine and the assault weapon challenges, they're trying to argue that laws banning Bowie knives, because Bowie knives were more dangerous and aggressive and offensive than regular knives. Laws banning Bowie knives are an historical analog to modern day semi-auto bans or 10-plus round mag bans. This is how far this stuff is getting stretched out.
Now, does this mean that a Bowie knife at the time would make 10-plus cuts?
Yeah,
and because it wouldn't make 10 or less cuts and then just dissolve?
Yeah. It's a 10-cut assault knife.
It's a 10-cut assault knife. Okay. What are their chances with this stuff? It can't be very good, I wouldn't think.
Well, no, they've got historians. They pulled all the old ghosts out of the closet. The philosophers that now that have been anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment forever. They're all out there filing their declarations in court as experts and telling the judges that, all this is just, this mousetrap law is specifically analogous to this ammo background check law. I mean,
yeah, good luck with that.
Well, but you
never know.
Certain courts are going to be inclined to want to embrace that.
Yeah. Which brings up the question: how are we doing around the country so far?
A mixed bag. New York is a big win so far. It really kind of just, the judge involved has become the central factor. Some will read Judge Thomas's ruling in the Bruin case and see what he said, which was that it's a statute. It's got to be a law. It's not some practice that one village doesn't let you store gunpowder in your house. It's got to be something broader than that to show that it was something that would have been tolerated and contemplated by the founders. But different courts are coming down different ways. We had one court that said, look, there was no historical analog to a serial number requirement, so it struck down the serial number law. All this stuff's going up on appeal. And frankly, I think there's probably going to wind up being a split among the Court of Appeal circuits, the circuit courts of appeal, and it's going to wind up back in front of the Supreme Court again to decide, okay, you laid out this test, but how do you really make it work? But in the meantime, I expect what we're going to wind up getting is alternative holdings in the district courts by judges who really want to, protect themselves from being overturned on appeal. So I think Judge Benitez will probably say, look, the appropriate test is not to have all these historians involved as experts in history or the history of gun laws. So I'm going to rule based on that, but I'm also going to make an alternative ruling that if we consider all this stuff, and we're saying, okay, let's indulge their argument that you should consider it. But even if you do, it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that they would have tolerated a complete ban on semi-automatic firearms. Or magazines. Look, the historical development of firearms was always trying to get a more powerful, from a musket to a Kentucky rifle to a Henry repeating tubular magazine. It was always trying to get quicker reloading, more accurate firearms developed for self-defense or militia use or whatever, but there was never a thought of let's restrict certain type of firearms from civilian possession because they're too dangerous.
It's patently absurd. It's just absurd in every respect. And so the question then becomes, as we start looking at this battle as it as it plays out. Obviously, you've got some job security for quite some time, it sounds like. I mean,
just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
Yeah, I know. See, you thought you were going on vacation. What the heck? It does seem to me, though, that we're getting some key victories around the country, and that we're just the one. I mean, it's kind of not really a total victory, but it's a partial victory on Measure 114 up in Oregon yesterday. We're starting to see some of these judges are reading the ruling going, okay, well, that's the way the Second Amendment is now, and that's the way we need to rule. I suspect that you're right. We're going to have some activist judges that are going to continue to try to put, as you said, their thumb on the scale and figure out some cockamamie way around it. But do you see this playing out for the next 10 to 20 years, or is it, I mean, what's the time frame do you think?
I don't think we're going to see the Supreme Court wait that long again, unless, part of the game that the states are playing is to delay with the hopes that the composition of the Supreme Court changes. I mean, Justice Scalia died at a hunting lodge. I'm sure they're hoping Justice Thomas, has a car accident or something while Joe Biden is still in office, so we can try and put another justice in. They're trying to, they're hoping and counting on the unknowables that might change the composition. But I think we're going to get the current Supreme Court is going to straighten this out pretty quick and not let it languish like they let post-McDonald cases languish. But in the meantime, you're going to see states pushing this theory, and you're going to see varying results. And also you're going to see, the blue resistance, the CRPA called, and I'm calling it the blue resistance, which is Newsom passing all these new laws. Illinois is getting ready to do a series of gun control laws, gun bans. And it's all part of the blue resistance to the Bruin decision. They want to just flood us with all these laws and try and make it impossible to have the legal resources to fight back against them all.
Well, hence the reason why your victory with regard to whether or not you can get your attorney's fees is so vital, because the government's just using our taxpayer money, and it's not a bottomless pit, but it's a near bottomless pit of money.
Oh, they'll just spend in debt. They don't care.
Yeah, they don't care, because the debt isn't on them; it's on the taxpayers. But you have to fund these things. Your CRPA does, and you've got to raise money to do it, and it gets expensive. So it's very important that you can recover your attorney's fees each time. Without that, I'm not sure the fight would be possible, and I suspect that's precisely what Newsom was trying to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Rob you of the ability to fight.
Absolutely. And by the way, I don't defend, frankly, what Texas was trying to do. I think, whether it's abortion or firearms laws, of course, now there's no constitutional right to an abortion anymore. So
state by state
changes that equation a little bit legally. But in California, you shouldn't do things to try and keep people out of court when they contest something that the government did. That's the forum where you're supposed to resolve your differences so that we don't have another civil war. You know what I mean? So to try and rig the game to make it impossible to challenge a government action, that ain't American. Whether it's Texas or California, it's not the way the game should be played.
You make a great point, because if you frustrate people to the point where you leave them no recourse, the only recourse is to fight it out physically. And that's obviously something we want to avoid. What else is happening in California that we should... Oh, I wanted to ask you, because I get a lot of questions about it. What's going on over in San Jose? Because I know that they've passed a cockamamie law that requires some nutty stuff in the city there. What's happening with that?
Okay, so San Jose passed the insurance requirement and a fee, a city license, basically, and some other conditions on gun ownership in the city of San Jose. That law's not in effect yet. They've been working to try and figure out how to put it in effect. One of the things it calls for is a nonprofit organization of some kind to hold these funds that the citizens, gun owners, have to pay into the city, so that they could try and get around calling it a tax. But anyway, it's been wrapped around the axle, trying to actually figure out how they're going to implement it. They have not been able to. Now, one group filed a lawsuit immediately. Frankly, they filed it prematurely, because the law had not been was not in effect. So we've got our local activist CRPA chapter in there all the time, going to all these meetings, bringing up these problems, pointing out these issues, and really throwing sand in the gears. Because it's not that they're illegitimate. These guys passed this law, which is not workable. There is no insurance that you can buy to defend against some criminal stealing your gun and shooting someone.
Well, and you can't, therefore, you cannot require someone to purchase insurance when it is unpurchasable.
Because it's impossible. That should be how people think. And
right.
So, but that's not how politicians think who want to get their name in the papers. So this was the mayor of San Jose at the time. I can't remember his name, but he's since left. And now he left this, this pile of mess behind for the city regulators to try and deal with.
Somehow I thought there was another word coming, pile of something there, but
well,
but you hesitated and said mess. Thank you so very much.
I know you're trying to stay PG, so
yeah, I am.
So CRPA is watching that. We've got our chapter involved. As soon as they actually try and implement that, we'll drop a lawsuit on them as long as we have the funding. And we were ready to file, but we had more fun, frankly, bollocksing them up with problems they never can realize that they had.
And hence the reason we have you have CRPA chapters all over the state. Hey, I wanted to ask you one other question, and that is the whole CCW list doxing thing. I got an email from you, and by the way, if you're watching this and you're not on CRPA's alert, you haven't joined their email blasts, go to their website, please, and do that, because you would have gotten the same emails that I just got. And I've got the form now that I need to fill out so that I can preserve my right to sue the state. And my understanding reading the emails, I've got to do that by the 20th of December in order to make that valid, get that mailed in. But
to be on the safe side, the 20th. There's probably a couple extra days, but don't get bogged down in that. File now.
No, that's fine. Get it done as soon as possible. My question is, I don't have the wherewithal to spend $100,000 suing the state. So my question, and I suspect that I'm not the only Californian who can say that.
No.
And so if that's the case, why would I fill out this form? What benefit is it, since I don't have the wherewithal to sue anyway?
Well, because at a minimum, you can file a small claim action, which costs $6.
Oh.
I think it might be 10 now. Lawyers aren't involved, and we put, I don't want to say templates, we're putting copies of lawsuits that we are filing up on the CRPA's webpage. We have a whole set of resources relating to this DOJ data leak on this resource page for people to refer to. So there's a sample admin claim form that you can look at what we wrote in there, and you can copy it if you want. I don't want to tell people how to do things because I don't want to be giving people legal advice. I don't want to get in trouble because I'm not anybody's lawyer on this, but CRPA is posting things to help you. So if you have, I think the cap on small claims is $10,000 in damages. You can make a $10,000 damage claim. We've got a memo there that explains all the different theories of liability that you can advance. And if you have bigger claims, we've filed a lawsuit on behalf of a district attorney in LA County, a woman who puts gangbangers on death row, and now they've revealed her home address. She spent years keeping all that information secret so she'd be safe. And now Bonta, has put her at risk from all these people who are not happy that they put their fellow gang members on death row. The first thing everybody needs to know is there's no class action. The same firm that filed that San Jose case prematurely jumped on board and filed a class action, or what they wanted to be called was going to be a class action. And everybody thought, oh, good, I'm protected. I'm part of this class. Well, no. They now realize that everybody's damages are different. They can't certify a class because there's not enough commonality among all the different class members. So it has to be individual lawsuits. It can be an individual lawsuit in small claims. That's the easy one. Even if you lose, what are you out? $10. Or if you have more concrete damages that you can show, like this DA, you can file a full-blown lawsuit. We will post everything from those lawsuits on the page, on the CRPA's webpage. So If you go to a lawyer, you can take the memo in, say, here, I'm interested in doing something like this, or you can try and do it yourself. If you're going to file a lawsuit outside small claims, I'd say get a lawyer, but we're going to package it and lay it out for lawyers to consider what we've already done, and then they're free to tweak it for the individual, but we're making it as easy as possible. That's all in development. And just stand by, because we're finalizing it, but for now, the important thing is to preserve your right to even choose later on that you want to do a small claim or you want to do a larger lawsuit. If you want to have that possibility, if you want to have that choice, you got to do the claim form now. So just do the claim form. It doesn't have to be perfect. They're almost always denied, no matter what kind of claim it is. And once it's denied, that triggers your ability, or if it's ignored, it triggers your ability to and enables you to file a lawsuit. Because if you don't do that claim form, then the state is going to say you failed to exhaust your administrative remedies.
Okay.
And if you fail to exhaust your administrative remedies, even if they're a kind of a sham, which often they are, but hey, you got to play the game. If you fail to exhaust your administrative remedies, you don't have a right to sue.
It is important, I would think, when I fill out that form, and because it says to mail it in, that when I mail it, I keep a copy of that and I note the day that I mailed it, and I put that in a safe place so that I can prove I mailed it.
I thought you could submit it online. No,
I don't know. I'll read it again. And if I could submit it online, that's even better. But I think it is important to keep a copy and note the day that I submitted it.
Yes, keep a copy. And you don't need to, people are asking, how much do I put out for damages? I can't tell you, you have to figure out, like, did you have to spend a lot of money with an internet service to scrub your data? Did you have to put in a new alarm system? Are you in a class of people where there are people who really might try and come kill you? Or are you like a red county guy who you got it because you needed it for general self-defense? Then you're not as at much risk. You can pick a value in there. It kind of doesn't matter too much if it's too high. But just put that in, and you don't need to put in. You can leave the field about who's your lawyers. You can leave that blank, and then put in your name. It's fairly self-explanatory, and the other language you can take from our sample form that we have on the CRPA's website and just copy and paste.
And I will put those links, I'll find them, and I'll put those links in the description. So if you're watching this and you're interested in doing that, then I'll put the link in the description. I'll also put the link in the description for the form itself, which I think is on the CRPA website as well.
There's a link to it, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just put a link so that you can go to the CRPA page. You'll be able to find all that information. So I thought that was pretty key to get that out.
The most recent development on that is that the independent investigation that the DOJ hired Morrison and Forrester, the law firm, to do, has been released. And they're trying to say that it was unintentional. And this is the big question, the big legal question in this case. And not to get too much into the weeds, but there's certain offenses require specific intent for them to be illegal versus general intent. So general intent means if you fire a gun into the air, you intentionally fired that gun. If it comes down and kills somebody, you're still guilty of murder. Even though you didn't intend to kill the person, you intended to fire the gun. That's the act that creates liability. With a specific intent crime, you actually have to fire the gun and intend for it to hit the person. Well, in this case, we believe that there's an element in the California Informational Privacy Act that says if the government intentionally releases information, they can be subject to heightened damages. So we think this is an offense where obviously the Attorney General intended to put this stuff on the internet. He posted a website. So maybe he didn't intend specifically for the street addresses of CCW, of 190,000 CCW holders to be publicized, but we don't think that matters. This is an intentional act by him, and he should be subject to statutory damages. But again, all those theories are going to be laid out in detail. If you ever want to be able to potentially use them, even just have the option of advancing that kind of a lawsuit, you got to file that claim.
Boy, I would say even if you have no intention of doing so, that intention may change. You may later decide that you want to do so, and if you don't fill out this form on time, you're not going to have the ability. You're going to be X'd out of the auction. What's it take 5 minutes to fill out the stinking form, right? I mean, do it.
We're not filing these lawsuits to mess around. We're going for a big win. This woman is in fear for her life because of what Bonta's DOJ did. That's it. That's the kind of thing that you're entitled to damages for. So,
well, and I'll tell you, cumulatively, we're talking about a lot of money. I mean, even if it was all just small claims court actions at 10 grand a pop.
Right, 198,000 CCW holders. Now, it's amazing to me how many of them don't seem to be paying attention or don't seem to care. But we got about 10,000 people who emailed us, and please don't email me now. Go to the CRPA's website. If you have questions, post them on the bottom. We're trying to get all the questions centralized so we can answer them in the comments section rather than having to field a million emails. But keep your options open, for crying out loud. We're going to try and package this and spoon feed it to you so that it's as easy as possible when the time comes to file a lawsuit.
No, I know the question is going to be there. Two things. One, I know the question is going to be asked, why not do a class action suit? So I'm going to ask it before I see it in the comments.
Well, we concluded early on that to do a class action, you have to be able to certify a class. In order to certify a class, you have to have typicality, commonality, and some other things that make it one unified class. Well, there's not one unified class here. You've got judges who are in their own class, prosecutors are in a class, defense attorneys are in a class. People have different types of damages or no damages. And you have to have you really have to be almost identical plaintiffs in order to constitute a class. So we concluded there was no class that could be certified here because there's too many different subclasses or individuals. And that's what the law firm that filed the class action initially ultimately came to conclude. That's what they finally realized. And that's why they've abandoned their class action. So there is no class action anywhere. And as far as we know, there will not be. So if you want to potentially decide maybe down the line that you want to try and get something from the DOJ for what they did to you, file the claim form.
Well, and you're probably more likely to actually have some money in your pocket if you do it individually than you are as a member of a class anyway, because...
Well, you might be, yes, because, at the end of the day on class actions, the lawyers make the money and the class members get a coupon for a hamburger, you know what I mean? or a year's free data monitoring, you know what I mean?
Right, you get $1.98 check that costs more for the check and the postage than it did for the value of it when it got there.
That's kind of the typical scam of class actions, yes.
Chuck, I know there's a number of things that you wanted to talk about, and I've been asking you a lot of questions. I apologize, but I did notice something, and this is what I'm perceiving here, and I ran this past Rick the other day. We've spent so long and so many years just holding the line. We've been on defense, just holding the line. But it sure seems like we're on offense now. Am I seeing this correctly?
Oh, we are on offense now. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to have to play defense on some of this blue resistance. When you talk to Rick, I'm sure he laid out the whole slew of new gun control laws that they're considering in Sacramento this next legislative session. So it's a give and take. They're going to pass all these laws. We're going to have to sue to strike those laws down. But we now have a much bigger tool, a much bigger hammer to use in challenging those laws than we used to. And in that sense, with that new tool, we are on the offense. This is a Second Amendment reckoning. That's what CRPA is calling this. That's what I'm calling it. It's a Second Amendment reckoning. We've had this stuff shoved down our throats for 2 decades, and now it's time to take back some of our rights and freedoms in court. And if enough people wake up, if some of the new gun owners wake up, and if some of the people on the local level wake up, and I'm not talking about the politically correct woke, I'm talking about realizing how people are trying to take your rights away, not just your Second Amendment rights, but all your rights for this big government nanny state concept. Maybe we can change a few elections. It only takes a couple hundred votes in some of these elections, especially the local ones, to change the game. So if people get engaged and involved because they feel the threat or they see that hope, and that's the big the big message, I guess, is that there's a lot more hope now for Second Amendment freedoms than there used to be. But there's a battle for the soul of America going on. The Second Amendment's the tip of the spear, but that's not all that's being fought over right now.
No, everything's being fought over right now, which brings an interesting question. How closely, is there a nexus, for example, between the work that Rick and his legislative lobbying team is doing and the work that you and your lawyers are doing? How closely do you guys work together as you're going forward with this stuff?
Oh, we help. Most laws that are proposed, it'll have this caption, Save the Children Law. Oh, Save the Children Law. Well, then you read it, and it has nothing to do with what the title is. And sometimes the way they wrote it, you really need a lawyer to decipher it, to unscramble it. So we work with Rick all the time. We're reviewing the legislation that's being proposed, commenting on what's wrong with it. Part of the opposing these things is pointing some things out. Now, it's not just legal. There's also, like, if you read some of the findings, some of the reports that they're relying on to say that having more guns in private hands in public, more CCWs makes us it makes us less safe. They cite these junk studies, and so we help find the right scientists to point out why what they're claiming is complete bogus, and it usually is. You go to Gun Facts and see some of the stuff that Guy Smith puts up there to tear apart some of these claims, or John Lott, or there's plenty. CRPA even has this book Gun Truths out right now that rips up some of this stuff. But that whole policy debate, the legal debate, the language of the law, all that stuff we consult with Rick on whenever he needs it.
And so now the question, I've peppered you with questions. We get to talk so seldom, I want to get you while I can. Is there something we haven't talked about that we should talk about that people need to know?
Well, two things. One thing in 2 states. The CCW Reckoning campaign. See, these cities were hoping that the cities that have historically been very resistant to issuing CCWs were hoping 918 would pass. When it didn't, they had to come to terms with the reality of the situation, which was that they now have to start issuing CCWs. And some of them kind of dragged their feet or hoped it would go away or put their head in their sand. And so what the CRPA has been doing is sending pre-litigation demand letters to all those cities that don't do what they're supposed to be doing, telling them, here's the law, this is what you have to do, start issuing. And so we've got a lot of cities, believe it or not, like even cities like LA and San Francisco are paying attention and starting to put down policies that allow people to get CCWs. It's still taking longer than it should everywhere, pretty much. But we're pushing and pushing and pushing. And there's a couple cities that have really been reluctant and obstinate in not coming to terms with the Bruin decision, and we're going to file lawsuits in those cities very soon. So that's forcing the cities to actually issue the permits. There could be, several million permits in California in the next couple of years. Once that happens and people realize that you don't have to be afraid of a guy, like they know in the other 40 states already that have already had this happen, you don't have to be afraid of a guy just because he has a gun. It normalizes gun possession, and that's what Newsom is terrified of. We sued in Hawaii as well, and now we're about to settle a case there with the state acknowledging that they have these obligations. They can't require some kind of a special need or good cause or any of that stuff anymore. And now some of the police departments are trying to pass new regulations that will make it hard to get a CCW, so we're opposing those. We're sending them pre-litigation demand letters. We're sending them comments, and we'll probably have to file another lawsuit in Hawaii to get the islanders their right to carry. Look, the way to take back our rights is to stay involved, support the CRPA's program, stay involved with stay informed, and make the calls when the time comes. Send the letters, and get involved in your local chapter. That's probably the best way to really be part of the solution because you will be involved, and you can have fun too. They do go to the range for their meetings, so meet some good people and have a good time and fight for your rights and your children's rights. But the one thing I would really make people hope understand, this is a historic time for the Second Amendment. This is history that we're making here now. With all these lawsuits and all these efforts and all this back and forth between state governments and politicians and bureaucrats and groups like the CRPA or GOC or others, that's a battle, like I said before, for America's soul. I mean, that's when you become a part of that, you are becoming part of history. You are leaving a legacy for future generations, your children and your children's children. It's how are they going to live their lives? Is the government going to tell them how to live their lives, or is there going to be some individuality remaining and self-motivation and freedom that we've always understood it to be? So get involved now, because it's a historic opportunity to change things.
Oh, I would agree 100%. I couldn't say it better. Chuck, thank you very much. Have a great week and a Merry Christmas, okay?
Anytime. Yeah. Merry Christmas. Season's greetings to everybody.
Thank you again for watching all the way through the interview. I'm very grateful that you do that, and I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas and a terrific weekend. And please, please, please support the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Again, a link for them is in the description. It's you may have to scroll down a little bit to find it, because I've got it in the standard group of links in the description of the video. So you'll find it there where you can join and where you can support the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Near the top, I put the link to their page about all that stuff with that form that you got to fill out so that you can preserve your right to sue California. Anytime you can sue California and actually get some money out of them, I suggest you do so. All right. Thank you again. Have a great week. Merry Christmas. And wherever you go, whatever you do, be safe.